Does knowledge, wisdom, require responsibility? The more that you learn, the more that you find out you don't know, right? I mean, I totally get that. And many times we get knowledge or wisdom later than when we actually need it. Um, but this is one way to get it right, is by getting it wrong and then learning how to do it right. I understand that knowledge and wisdom are two different things. I'm not going to get into that in this particular teaching. But getting wisdom is a double-edged sword, as many times seeking wisdom, that particular type of knowledge, is a lot of hard work. But then again, if we don't get wisdom, you'll pay a higher price later. So either way, we're going to pay, but it's just a matter of whether you pay now or later. We all get to choose. And we all know that there are different types of wisdom in many different areas. We see this with King Solomon, who was the smartest guy in the world at the time. He states this in Ecclesiastes, all the different areas that he's sought wisdom. And there are also different ways to get wisdom. One, for example, that we just said, we can get it right after we need it by making bad decisions and learning the hard way. Two, we can learn from the mistakes of others. Three, we can read books, but then some supposed smart people really aren't that smart when they speak against God's wisdom and truths. And then four, we can read the Bible, which has unending wisdom, if you allow the Spirit to teach you those depths. And I find that many people today don't care for the deeper revelations of the Bible. Or so if they want to understand it, or if they want to get that, those deeper things, they want it very quickly, as they're living by the speed of the world. Not really focusing on relationship with the one that is omnipotent, which is having all knowledge, that is omnipotent, has all power, and is omnipresent, is everywhere at once, because he holds the world together, per Colossians 1, verses 16 and 17. And I'm not here to condemn anybody. I know that people have families, people have lives, people are trying to work, make ends meet. What I am trying to say is that try not to crowd that Bible time, that prayer time, that time where you're asking him, include him in your seeking of answers. I am saying that. As even Yeshua said in John 15, verse 4, he said, "Stay in me, and I stay in you. As the branch is unable to bear fruit of itself, unless it stays in the vine, so neither you, unless you stay in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who stays in me and I in him, he bears much fruit. Because without me, you are able to do naught. You're able to do nothing." And in today's world, there's just been this, seems like there's a recent explosion of AI. I know it's not really recent, but it just seems to be in our face a lot here lately. But AI seems to be making it worse. Because if we let AI do our thinking for us, then we'll start to lose our minds, literally, so to speak, because we won't be using our thinking capabilities, capacities so much. So if we allow it, the world is trying to dumb us down, keep us divided, and in the dark with so much misinformation. So I find this contrast very interesting, because the Bible, in many places, says to get wisdom. as a principal priority in our lives. And obviously, either directly or indirectly, this theme, getting wisdom, is all throughout the Bible. And that also shows that we in ourselves are limited mortal beings that always have a tendency to mess things up because we don't know everything. We're not everywhere at once. We don't have all power. But in regards to wisdom, we see that the fear and the awe of Yah, of God, is the beginning of wisdom, as that is stated in Proverbs 1, verse 7 and 9, verse 10, which is why I was saying it's probably not a good idea to crowd them out of your lives when you're dealing with problems in your life, and we all got things that we have to deal with. Now, in Proverbs chapters 3, 4, and 8, the Bible directly tells us the many benefits of obtaining wisdom, as well as in Deuteronomy chapter 28, the blessings of being obedient to Yah's commands, to God's commands. But what are the costs, of not investing into getting God's wisdom? Well, Yah speaks of those curses, of being unwise and not following his commands in Deuteronomy 27, 28, end of 28, which is kind of where we're at in the world right now, to be honest, because God, Yah, has been squeezed out of our lives in large part, out of the schools, out of the government, out of, the church has been more influenced by the world than the other way around. And so here's a verse that many people quote, but they tend to ignore the second half of this verse. So I'm going to say it and relay it to you for your listening enjoyment. And that is Hosea 4:6, as the Bible states there, "My people have perished for a lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I reject you from being priest for me, for God, for Yah. Since you have forgotten the Torah of your Elohim, of your God, I also forget your children." Harsh words, I know, but he's been trying to tell us, hey, seek wisdom, seek, I'm trying to help you here. But how do we perish? Because we are in a spiritual war as Walk with Yah is trying to get across to people. The enemy is oppressing people through, their provision, their finances, their health, through mental disorders, through working via curses, witchcraft, etc. We were actually given the world to take dominion over it. That's early on in Genesis 1, Genesis 2, thereabouts. But we were supposed to get his guidance along the way, because there was a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't know about. He was just like, go take dominion. We're like, we didn't know what was out there. And so he was depending, wanting for us to keep going to him for instructions, for wisdom. And what we got instead were the doctrines of demons. 1 Timothy 4, verse 1. Living beyond the life that Yah wanted us, for us, in a way that he did not want us to live. But we're now at a point where we're so used to living this way and complacent in our thinking that, well, this is just what life is. But that's a big lie. This is not the way he intended it. he can turn it around for us. He wants to, but he's like, look, follow my ways. Like, I got some wisdom here. Like, I kind of created things. I know how they work. In 1 Peter 5, verse 8, 1 Peter 5, 8, the Bible says, be sober. Watch, because your adversary, the devil, walks around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. 2 Corinthians 2, verse 11, lest Satan should take advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his thoughts, of his ways, his devices, his schemes. Because you need to be aware of how the enemy's trying to set you up. You need to be aware of how spiritual warfare works. Again, that's what Walk with the Us trying to do. But here's another question. Do we just need wisdom? Is that it? Is that all we need? And so, as I said before, there are all different types of wisdom. And sometimes I see things that the unclean spirits do and, convince people of, and how they maneuver some stuff. And I'm kind of like, wow, like, that's actually evil genius, how you got this person to believe that. I'm like, how did you even do that? And so, much like the parable of the shrewd manager, the dishonest manager in Luke 16, the enemy works over Yah's people all the time, every day, everywhere, because we don't know his ways. We don't have his wisdom. But how is godly wisdom different? Well, it should be life-giving and loving. In the Bible, in 1 Corinthians 8, verse 1, the Bible says, we know that we have all knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. If anyone thinks that he knows somewhat, he does not yet know as he should know. In other words, don't think that you know everything. In dealing with spiritual warfare and stuff, I find I run into new stuff all the time. I sometimes feel that we have a little bit of Bible knowledge and we tend to think that we know a lot. And I'm like, no, it's really kind of showing us that, again, we don't really know that much. And so, but again, it's not just wisdom, it's love. And who is love? Love's a person, which is, yeah, God is love. And in the Bible, knowing a person involves relationship. We see this in John 10, verse 14, where Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, and I know mine, and mine know me. That concept of knowing in the Bible, says that Adam knew Eve. It means that he was very intimate with his wife. He knew her. So in the Bible, when it says know, it means to have this great intimacy, knowledge through intimacy. And so in 1 John 2, verse 4, the Bible states, the one who says, I know him, meaning Yah, God, and does not guard his commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever guards his word, truly the love of Elohim has been perfected in him. But this we know that by this we know that we are in him. So eventually this will lead to a question. Okay, but what are we personally accountable for? Well, of course, the Bible has answers for that. Because in Luke 12, verses 35 through 48, I'm not going to read all of that, Jesus says, starting in verse 47, he's talking about a servant, and the servant's doing, being prepared for the day that the servant comes back. That we should be ready, or some are not. But in verse 47, he says, "And that servant who knew his master's desire and did not prepare, nor did according to his desire, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know, yet did what deserved flogging, shall be beaten with few. And everyone to whom much is given, from him much shall be demanded. And to whom much has been entrusted, from him much more shall be asked." We also see this in the parable of the 10 talents in Matthew 25, as it ends with these verses, starting with Matthew 25, verse 28. Again, I'm not going to read the whole parable. You can read that for yourself. But it states, ends with, "Therefore, take the talent from him and give it to him who possesses 10 talents. For to everyone who possesses, more shall be given, and he shall have overflowingly. But from him who does not possess, even what he possesses shall be taken away. And throw the worthless servant out into the outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So after doing deliverance ministry for over 10 years, I've gained some wisdom. I've had to pay a price to get that wisdom, and I still continue to pay a price to grow in that wisdom. And I do this so that I can help others get to where they need to be on their path to their their God-given destiny. Because we all need to be in our positions doing what we were created to do. That'll make it easier for everybody, if at all possible. But keep this in mind. Even you, by listening to what I am saying even now, or by listening to your, any preachers or pastors or rabbis have to say, if it doesn't change you, if you don't do anything with it, if you're just keeping knowledge as stored potential, it's not doing you any good. And it's actually maybe hurting you because you are responsible for what you know. Now, I'm a teacher type, as I want to empower people to help themselves. And it states in James 3, verse 1, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, knowing that you shall receive greater judgment." So I know that I'm held to a higher standard if I'm going to try to teach you, but I believe it's worth it. I get to experience Yeshua, Jesus, working in ways that continually amaze me. Sometimes supernatural, sometimes not. But I'll end with these words that King Solomon said at the end of Ecclesiastes, in Ecclesiastes 12, verse 12, starting there. "And besides these, my son, be warned. The making of many books has no end, and much study is a wearying of the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the entire matter. Fear Elohim and guard his commands. For this applies to all mankind. For Elohim shall bring every work into right ruling, including all that is hidden, whether good or evil." So I hope that this helps you. We have many lessons to learn in this life. And there's a lot of benefits to getting the wisdom that he has to teach us. It actually will bring fulfillment, joy, blessings for you to bless, your generations, you, and those around you. And so I just encourage you to, again, seek him for that wisdom, um, whether in his word, whether in prayer, a mixture of both, all the above. Um, and just make sure that we test that wisdom that we do get, from the world, against his word. And so, but I hope that this helps you, and just know that maybe your miracle could be next.